This is Creepy and Geeky, a part of the Morbidly Beautiful Podcast Network. Welcome to Creepy and Geeky. I'm your host, Robert, and on today's episode, we're exploring the magical world of Doctor Strange. Joining me for this episode is Kevin Uhrich, the host of the Video Confidential podcast and a contributor to Neon Splatter, Horror Facts, and Film Cred. Welcome back to the show, Kevin.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Especially for Doctor Strange.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's a, good it's a good movie, so it should be a good conversation for sure. Yeah, it's what is this, the second movie of Phase 3? So we're just, Doctor Strange has been mentioned at least once in Captain America Winter Soldier, just kind of like as a passing name.
That's right. Yeah, I forgot about that. It's been a while since I've seen Winter Soldier, so
yeah. So it's just a really offhanded comment. It's not really like
right. It's
like
it's
pointed
from
out.
Sitwell?
Jasper Sitwell. Yeah. So
yeah,
he's mentioning that he's a high profile target. But this is really our first taste of this in the MCU, and it's a first look at anything in the magical realms. So it's we've had a little bit of kind of out there storytelling now with the first Guardians at this point. We haven't really gotten into anything too crazy yet. So this is our first real look at anything kind of really out there.
Right, and Thor did that whole thing in the first film where he's just like, well, your ancestors called it magic and you call it science, and it's like, all right. And I was just like, exactly. No, we have magic. I don't know.
We have real magic, yeah. So it's a fun movie. It's interesting. I like it overall. There's a few things here. I think the villain's not super compelling. Caecilius.
It's a very, like, I love Mads Mikkelsen. I think he's great, but it is very much like like it's hard to say because it feels like they're trying to balance his villainy with the reveal of the Ancient One also being like tapped into the dark dimension. So
right,
it's like we have to try to show that there's good people on both sides, and maybe corruption isn't
right. No, and I think that's ultimately where it comes down to also, is because we get this moment in the movie where Caecilius is basically kind of explaining his motivations, and he's not necessarily in the wrong. The way he's going about it is obviously wrong, because when he's talking about how the Ancient One is using that power from the dark dimension, he's trying to say, well, she's just hoarding it for herself and not using it for the good of others and everything. And it's like, well, obviously she's not being corrupted by it, like they did. I mean, him and his followers instantly got corrupted by it. Their faces like start to turn, around their eyes start turning
crazy
dark.
Eyes,
yeah. So it's like, well, something's going on here that you're not dealing with in the right way. You obviously, in this quest for power, whether your intentions were good or not,
right,
is kind of leaves something to be desired.
And that's also the Ancient One says, she's like, I hated doing it. It was just, I was trying to keep things in check as much as I could, but I kind of lost the path a little bit my own way.
Yeah, right.
And that's kind of the whole thing with everybody's story in this is like especially obviously with Doctor Strange, where it's like, I mean, his whole quest is I'm trying to get my hands healed so I can go back to the life I had. And
Right.
the Ancient One's just like, that's the worst idea. Don't do
Yeah.
that. You know,
Yeah. That
you're an
life is over.
amazing sorcerer. Like you're, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah, and I
and,
think that's, going back to the beginning, we meet Doctor Strange as this, highly respected and very good neurosurgeon. And he's really good at um at being a neurosurgeon. And but it's given him an ego about it as well. He knows he's the best and he acts like he's the best. And it just everything comes so easy to him.
he's a cocky rich guy. I don't know if Marvel's done
Yeah.
that one before. That sounds brand new to me. I don't know. He's a
Yeah,
cocky rich
yeah,
guy with a goatee. I don't know. No, I know
yeah,
that was
exactly.
the thing. I know people were kind of jumping on this for. They were like, "Oh, it's just Iron Man all over again." It's like not exactly. I mean,
Right.
it's he. I mean, Doctor Strange goes through, I'd say, more of a journey than Tony Stark, an emotional journey and a journey of self discovery than Tony Stark does in that first movie.
Oh,
Like
absolutely.
Tony Stark gets, he gets that moment where he realizes like I don't want to make weapons anymore. But
But he
I mean,
continues,
Doctor
but
Strange's whole life has changed. Like,
right. Well, and that's the interesting thing too, because you can say yes, they had similar beginnings and they had similar ways of becoming these heroes, but I would argue that at the end of it, Strange is he comes out of it on the other side less cocky, less. Yes, he knows he knows he's a good. Well, okay, so here's the thing. I now looking at it, I don't think he's come out of it better because you're going into some of the later installments of things. Yeah, no, he's just as cocky. So yeah, so he and Tony Stark have a lot in common. Uh because they continue to do things thinking they know what to do, and it blows up in their face, and
that's true.
then
That does
they
come
have
to
to
pass
figure,
multiple
and
times in the future.
right, and they do have to figure out how to fix it on their own, and because they're the only ones who can then fix it. They create a mess that only they can fix. um and which is fun and interesting. Of course, it makes for good storytelling. But yeah, no, it's definitely. I would say still though that as much as it seems to be that Strange tends to learn the right lessons along the way, and not that Tony
Yeah.
doesn't, but Tony definitely still has a level of hubris to himself that continues on into
Oh,
until his
absolutely.
death.
Tony Stark
So,
feels like he's always going to be the smartest guy in the room, and it's probably
right,
because he is 9 times out of 10. But still,
right, exactly.
and that's kind of that's what makes the interplay between him and Strange later on in Infinity War so good, because it's like you have these
Right,
two
just
gigantic
two
egos
cocky guys.
clashing.
Yeah, yeah, no,
But
absolutely.
it's definitely, yeah, it's I guess it's more of well, I guess it's more of in a way it is more of an emotional journey for Strange, because he learns to realize like, I can't go back to this life I had, and he's going to live this kind of life of permanent suffering, just being like my hands are never going to be what they once were.
Right,
I could change them in an instant if I really want to, but maybe I don't. Maybe I want this life of being a sorcerer and helping people in a different way.
right. Well, and that's the thing that he does learn too, because he he loses the ability to use his hands in this car wreck. Um, and then when he wakes up, they've done whatever they've done to mangle his hands, and then he goes to every experimental procedure and everything
Mm.
else, and trying to look up all the different ways that he could possibly figure out how to um repair his hands, because he wants to get back to that life, because he doesn't know anything else outside of that, which is understandable. I mean, if that's something you were good at, and um, it'd be really like if Tony had lost the ability to create as well and to use his hands
Yeah.
in that way. Tony ultimately, yes, he's got that shrapnel in his heart, and yes, it's trying to kill him and everything, but he's created a device that stops that and makes it so that he can continue doing everything else he's done. Strange, on the other hand, yes, he gets back the use of his hands to a certain extent, but that pain is still there.
Mm.
Um, and it's a constant reminder of that. And I think that's why he leaves it like that, because he finds out during the course of all this that there is this guy who was completely paralyzed and is now able to walk. And he
Yeah.
finds he yeah, he finds out through everything that it's through going to this Camartage place, and he was able to use magic to do this, bringing power into himself and letting him walk. So you would assume that, like, and that's his goal right there, is to bring this power into his hands and to heal his hands in that way. um and like you said, rather than doing that, he discovers along the way that he's a good sorcerer, and that's what he wants to do. His goal in life changed, from being this well respected neurosurgeon to becoming the sorcerer supreme.
And also kind of realizing, like the Ancient One says, where she just goes, "You have," and it's the other through line for the film, where the Ancient One and Christine Palmer both just say, "It's not about you. It's you have to learn
Yeah,
that this is like there are bigger things out there than just you and your ego. You have to put those things aside." And it's kind of,
right.
I mean, to a degree, he does, yeah. But
Yeah,
he'll still keep that in ego when he has to, and just be like I am the sorcerer supreme. Don't forget that.
yeah, exactly. And that's the fun thing about this movie, is just, like, for me, watching this, like, him, once he gets to Camartage and gets confronted by this nature of this world, or this, like, and not really a world, but these dimensions that surround him that he hasn't been a part of, this wider world, in a way. Once his mind is open to all that, he it's fun to watch him dig into that,
Mm-hmm.
because it's
As
like,
he's
it's a yeah, it's a whole new world to learn and discover, and figure out.
an astral project and read at the same time. That's,
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah. Yeah, exactly. His body can rest, and he can still continue to read. And that's what I thought was interesting too, because you've got all these other students, and yet he's surpassing all these people who may have been there even longer than him, because he's just, he is obsessive about learning all this stuff, so
and
good or bad.
yeah, and that's kind of what I like about this too. It speeds like most movies, you'll get the montage and things like that of him learning these things, and this handles the montage so radically different in a way where it's just like, okay, we're gonna show you how he's learning these things, but we're gonna speed it up to a degree where you're just like, okay, he's like basically reached the highest level he can get to in the span of like 10 minutes instead of like 20.
Yeah.
And
um
that's kind of, I think that I feel like that's a Marvel thing now, where they're just like, we have to expedite as much as possible and speed through as much of an origin as we can, instead of, so we can get to kind of these bigger set pieces that, I
right.
mean, I didn't get a chance to see this in theaters, but even seeing this at home, I was still extremely impressed with like the fights in the mirror dimension and things like that.
Right.
Like him just
um
going through that subway.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, no, it's like, all of the mirror dimension stuff is interesting. And it's a different take on magic too. Like, you know, the way they say in this is that, they're not just like conjuring up, spells. They're not just shooting lightning bolts at each other or anything like that. It's not just, the traditional what we think of as magic, but more
Yeah.
of doing these um spells and movements and stuff like that to take power from other dimensions, and like not take it but to borrow the power from other dimensions to be able to use, and to be able to do it in ways that um are somewhat more grounded, I guess. Creating like shields and portals and such. So it's interesting in the way they do it. I thought it was really well done.
And using the artifacts having powers because they're it's like some magic's too powerful, so we have to contain it in these things. So
Right. Yeah, no. I thought that was really good. The way they've kind of, because that was something that in the Doctor Strange comic books, they, some of that was definitely there. They talked about, there are definitely these objects of power. Like in the past, they did all that. In more recent years, they've grounded a little bit more and explained how magic, when you use magic in the comic books, there's a price to pay. So if you are using magic, then you at some point have to pay back for using that magic. And in whatever manner that takes. Um,
well, it kind of
uh,
I mean they kind of reference that slightly
yeah,
with Mordo towards the end when he says about when Strange is reversing time and everything like that, and Mordo is getting ready to leave, and he just basically says like the bill comes due at some point,
right.
and
Yeah.
we get that post credit scene that maybe will never get paid off. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, because
Yeah.
it feels like that was well, I know there was initially a plan for that in Multiverse of Madness that got changed,
Right.
but that setup
Yeah.
at the end is just like, are we gonna get that at some point? Like, are we gonna see Mordo coming back and being like, there are too many wizards, so are too many sorcerers, so I'm gonna kill you guys.
Right. Yeah. No, I think that it's definitely the in credit sequence. Like, I definitely think that there was stuff that was being laid down in this movie that was going to be picked up in a later movie, but because of things shifting and because of change in director, that they ended up going in a different direction, because this one was directed by Scott Derrickson, who is a horror director who did what was it, Sinister.
Sinister,
Yeah.
Exorcism of Emily Rose, a few other
Yeah.
very, very. I like his work a lot. I didn't see the Black Phone yet, but he did that as well.
Oh yeah, Black Phone's really good, and that's what ended up happening, was that he ended up getting to do the Black Phone and decided to go do that instead of um this, which also they were having, I guess, some creative differences with not this movie, but with the next one. And
Mm.
so I think that's why we didn't end up getting any of the continuation of any of the ideas that he had, that he was pushing through into the next one. But I would argue that it wasn't necessarily a bad thing. I like Multiverse of Madness a lot, so
Oh, absolutely. I felt
I think
Multiverse of Madness really, really stepped up. Where I mean, I this is Doctor Strange. The first one is actually one of my favorite Marvel movies, but Multiverse of Madness really steps up a lot of the
right,
concepts in a fun and interesting way. And the fact that it's
right,
directed by Sam Raimi is also
yeah,
like
yeah,
he's one of my all-time favorite directors, and he does so many fun, ridiculous things in it. You can't help but enjoy it.
yeah, exactly. But this one's good. I think this first one is good because it sets up kind of the universe, even if it doesn't, like, there's not ideas that get played out in later things, with Doctor Strange, either in the Avengers movies or in his own movie, that at least the kind of the concepts of him as a sorcerer supreme kind of get seated here and get somewhat played up in other
Oh, definitely. This is a
things like
really
with the
strong
ancient one.
origin
Yeah.
movie. Like it handles the origin extremely well from, the from his hands. And that car accident scene is so just like when you
Oh,
see
it's
his
brutal.
hands going under, and then
Yeah.
it's just like, oh, you know what's going to happen next, and then you see the aftermath. And that's the other thing too I really liked was, speaking of his growth as a character, is like when he wakes up and he looks over at the other doctor, who's, they've kind of established him as a bit of a rival and
Yeah.
not as good as Strange, obviously, but he's just like, you ruined me, like you
Yeah.
ruined my life essentially. And then at the end he's just there, and he gives him the scalpel to operate on the ancient one when she's on the table. And he's so it's kind of his growth and being like, all right, you know what, I realized it wasn't your fault that this happened in my hands. It is my fault for driving and texting, but
Well, and that's the other thing though too. That's him learning that, he can't control everything and that he does have to uh hand over that control, even if it's to somebody he doesn't necessarily think is up to par. He has to then trust in others, and that's part of him growing as this character, as this person. And it's something that you see in later things like the Avengers movies that he's in, um and everything, that there's a portion of that that he has to give over. He has to give up at times to have something happen. So I think that's a huge growth moment on his part,
mm,
to show that look, he could do it. He probably could, but he realizes in that moment that he probably shouldn't,
mm.
and he needs to hand it over to somebody else who at that moment is probably more than capable enough.
Oh yeah, definitely. It's a very it's the learning moment. It's the final, like, final step on his path to becoming the Doctor Strange we know.
Right. Yeah, but it's really good. I think Benedict Cumberbatch was the best person to play him. I know that he was the original first choice, but he had a conflict in scheduling, so then he couldn't take it. And then Joaquin Phoenix was then uh,
Mm.
potentially the replacement for him, but then Joaquin Phoenix didn't want to be part of something that he was going to get tied to for so long with multiple things, you know. So
And now look at it.
yeah,
He's the Joker.
yeah, but
Isn't it ironic?
it's yeah, but I'm glad Benedict Cumberbatch, like, eventually things got pushed back enough that he was able to take on the role, because I think he's just perfect at it. Um,
I
he's
do
got the
like
right,
Benedict
yeah,
Cumberbatch. I think I'm gonna be one of those people who goes in and just is like, the voice doesn't totally work for me. His American accent is not my favorite.
right,
He could have easily kept that British accent and been totally fine. I would have been absolutely all right with it. I think it gets better as each movie goes on, but that this first one where it just feels like little, like somebody described it perfectly, where it's like he's doing Alan Rickman's American accent in Die Hard 2 or Die Hard when
right,
he's being Bill Clay, and it's just like,
yeah,
oh no, you're gonna kill me, and it's like, oh yeah, that's Benedict Cumberbatch right there. But I think he is an excellent choice. I think he manages to really uh portray all of these different emotions that this character has to go through. I mean, that the scene when he's, talking to Christine after his accident, and she's just like, she comes in and she's telling him like, you can't do this, you don't have the money to do this anymore, this is all, you have to give up everything. And he says, I forget what he says, and then she just goes, this is where you apologize, and he goes, this is where you leave. And he shows the hurt, but he's also showing that sadness that, like, I'm
yeah.
doing this to somebody that I really care about, but I'm so, broken inside that I can't, you know. I can't let her see how this affects me.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, it's that's why I just think he's really good at it, because he's just a really good actor in general. If anybody's seen like anything else that he's done, and like specifically, I think his work on Sherlock was
Mm-hmm.
super good, and so I think that he, once seeing him in that, it just was like, okay, yeah, I could definitely see him as a Doctor Strange as well. So,
Yeah, he
um,
pulls the egotistical Sherlock, or plays the egotistical Sherlock so well that he could just play the egotistical Doctor Strange so well.
exactly. Um, but speaking of Christine, Rachel McAdams, I she's a great actress. I really like her. I think that she's so underused in these movies. It just
Oh,
like I
absolutely.
really wish she was more in them. Like much more of a major character, but she gets pushed aside for his stories so much.
Yeah.
Even in Multiverse of Madness, where I believe she's more in it, but even still, she's barely more in it. So
Yeah, she's basically there, but not. She's there just to sit there essentially and be like, "Oh wow, this is crazy, isn't it?" But I mean, she does play a larger role in the What If series, I guess, where they have
yes,
that
yes,
where he travels through the keeps constantly trying to fix the mistake, but um yeah, she's very underutilized. Even with a set piece like her doing the surgery when he's in his astral form, it's still more of a focus on him fighting against Scott Atkins in his astral form, where he's just like,
right.
"Okay, I'm going to tell you what to do. Do this, and then hit me with the defibrillator." And she's just like, "Okay, you got it, boss. Your name's in the
Right.
title."
Yeah. Yeah, no, definitely. I think she just unfortunately, hopefully she gets more at some other point. We'll see. I kind of doubt it. I think they've kind of run the course with the character. Um, I don't think
Mhm.
she'll have
If
much more in the future.
Yeah, it feels like it gets very closed off at the end of Multiverse of Madness
Yeah.
for her and Strange. But then again, there's always the chance they could write something for it. I mean,
Yeah,
there's infinite possibilities in this universe.
exactly. Um, and so then we got the ancient one played by Tilda Swinton,
I
which is,
love her in this
yeah,
so much.
she's really good in this. I know there was a lot of complaints about it because the original Ancient One in the comic books was an older Asian man,
Mhm.
and so people were kind of complaining. Well, okay, well, why didn't you give it to somebody of Asian descent or whatever? And he did think about that. He did think about making it a woman. He always wanted it to be a woman because he wanted to change the perception on it being a singular person, but the ancient one being a title. And so when he did that, he wanted it to be a woman. And he did think about it being an Asian woman, but he didn't want people then to just be complaining about that as well. About like,
Right.
oh, well,
Yeah, it could fall into that
he can't,
ridiculous stereotype
yeah,
of the
he wasn't going to win
wise
any
old
way he did
ancient
it.
Asian person. It's like, all right,
Yeah.
that's yeah.
So he wasn't going to win either way. So he was just like, you know what? I'm just going to get Tilda Swinton, and then this will work out well. And it did. I think that she pulls it off very well. It's like a role that's very well suited for her talents. So
Absolutely. Totally agree. And she pulls off the bald head very well. Like she
she
has a great
does.
head shape for it. I can't explain it. Like some actresses, they just pull off that bald head thing so perfectly, and then Tilda Swinton
Yeah.
has it down. Like, and I love the makeup scarring on the back of it, where it's kind of just like, oh, like the Ancient One's seen some stuff, like been through
Yeah.
a lot of battles in this time, and just that sequence in the beginning, like just the fighting against Caecilius and his zealots, and it's just like that's amazing stunt work, and she seems to be doing a lot of it.
Right.
Um, So yeah, I give Tilda Swinton does such great work here, and even her brief moment in Endgame, she's great. Like I think she pulls it off as this
Right.
character, and it doesn't fall into the traps of like making it a little too arch or anything like that as a character. Like you
No,
could play
yeah.
this character very broad, and she handles it so well. Like that scene when she just takes him to Everest, and then she's just like, "Well, most people die within 7 minutes. You would probably go into shock within two. All right, I'll see you later." And then she's, they're waiting, and then she just goes, "Well, maybe I should go and take it."
Yeah, and I think that's what's interesting too, though, because the character, she obviously knows more about Steven than she lets on.
Mm.
And about what he's capable of and what he will eventually become. Obviously because she's got the Eye of Agamotto, which has the time stone in it. Um, and so, she knows what's going to happen. So she knows, like, or at least she knows the possible future, as long as things go according to plan. And so it's I think that's what makes it interesting in those moments where she trusts that he'll rise to the occasion, because that's what you know she's
Right.
seen the possible future of him doing that. So
And that's the other great scene when she's on her deathbed essentially, and she's
yeah.
astral projected out, and she just like she tells him like, "I've seen this moment countless times, but I've never seen any further. So I know this has to be the moment where she can only see so far. She can't go beyond
Right.
her own lifespan or anything like that. So she knows this is my moment, but I'm going to let you know that you are, you're so much more than this brilliant surgeon that you thought you were. Because he says like, oh, I can get my hands back, I can go back to my old life, and she just tells him, and the world would be lesser for it.
Right.
Your brilliance as a sorcerer is what could change the entire world, really, if we,
Right.
and she's letting him know, and she's telling him like, my time's done. I've lived a life. I've done things that I regret. I've taken this power from the dark dimension, but if it helps lead you on this path to becoming the sorcerer supreme, then I'm glad I did it.
Yeah. No, and I think it's because what she's basically saying to him is that, sure, you could heal your hands and you could then go save what, maybe hundreds of people over the rest of your life. That's great. That's not a bad thing.
Yeah.
But if you don't do that and you become this sorcerer, and keep being this sorcerer, then you could potentially save millions, billions even, you know, and that's more important than just going back and becoming this surgeon, going back to this old life, that is no longer for you. You've risen above this now. You've gone to another um you part of your life that
Mm,
now is more important than just being the neurosurgeon. So
right. You could help save half of all life on Earth. Hint, hint,
exactly.
hint. We're not going to foreshadow anything. Don't worry. But
Right, exactly.
but you
But
could
yeah,
save a
no,
lot of people, Stephen.
yeah. So it's it's a great sequence though, because it's definitely it is that turning point aspect for him where he has to make the choice. Is he going to step up and become the hero and embrace his new destiny, or is he going to slide backwards and reject everything? And obviously we all know the hero's journey is he's gonna accept his new destiny and continue
And I
forward.
do I do
So
love that moment. But and he accepts it, and he's putting up the cloak, and he lifts up the collar of the cloak, and he's just like,
yeah.
yeah, it's like it's that cool, supposed to be the, I guess, quote unquote badass moment of the movie, and then the
Right.
cloak is like rubbing a smudge on his face, and it's just like, okay, stop.
Yeah.
It's
And
like
apparently
he's
that
oh
no,
god.
go ahead.
I was just saying he accepts who he is, and we have a nice
Yeah.
little joke with it.
Yeah. And apparently that was actually his idea, was to have the cloak do that. And so he mentioned it to them and they were like, you know what, that's a good idea. So they went ahead and animated it. So
I mean, it works perfectly. It takes it
oh
it
yeah.
it doesn't deflate the scene. It adds a nice little punch to it where it's just like, all right,
Yeah.
we were very serious in those last couple of minutes. Let's just lighten things
Yeah.
up because we're getting to the craziest finale we can get to.
Right.
Which is another
And
thing
that
I love about this movie is the finale of it.
oh yeah. No, and we get I want to talk briefly about a couple of the side characters, and we have already
Oh,
mentioned him once,
absolutely.
was Mordeaux, which is sort of like it's you're they're meant to become friends, but you never feel like, to me, they never felt like they truly became friends. They just became like, classmates, somebody
Yeah,
that you
it's
can, friendly enough, don't get me wrong, but they never felt like they became true comrades.
yeah,
Um,
he seems to push for Strange really hard in the beginning, and then it's just like, yeah, all right, I'm gonna show you some stuff, and
yeah,
oh, you brought him into the mirror dimension. Well, that was a mistake. You should have done that. It's like, could you be more constructive, like,
yeah,
please, at all? Like,
yeah. It's just it's interesting, like, but it's also, I think, partially because Strange starts to outshine him. And there's um that jealousy, like there's a little bit of jealousy in there,
mm,
that that Strange is outshining him and he's becoming the more favored student of the Ancient One, and and he's obviously becoming much better and bigger and stronger than he was. And he uses the time stone and they all freak out, and but obviously, the Ancient One was just kind of like, okay, yes, that you know yes, he did that, but he did well with it. So
yeah,
you know but yeah, so I do find that an interesting relationship, that it's not, that they kind of build it up, but at the same time there is that distance, and I think that jealousy, and they pit that, because in the comic books, Mordo is a villain.
mm,
um he's um just another sorcerer, of course, that just is an antagonist for Doctor Strange off and on again. So so they're kind of building it up, and we mentioned the end credit sequence, with Mordeaux, where he's kind of taken on this villainous turn, that doesn't get really picked up again in the future. I mean, kind of in Multiverse of Madness, but kind of like it's mentioned, kind of like that they're not friendly anymore, but that's about it.
yeah.
So, um,
It's very glossed over.
yeah. But the big one, and the one that's interesting in this one, is Wong. That he in this one, he's kind of lackluster. He gets his role gets built up over the course of other movies.
Mhm. Yeah, he's
And
very, very just kind of has okay moments, but is
yeah,
very just kind of more reactionary in this
right,
than anything. Like with the scene in the library
right,
when Strange is using the sling ring and stealing all of the books behind his
right.
back while he's listening to
He's
single ladies, which I think is kind of funny. But he's a very
yeah,
reactionary character. And I love that that character they let him just be like, we're gonna let him shine in the next,
yeah,
multiple movies and on She-Hulk and everything. We're gonna let Benedict Wong just destroy because he's
yeah.
so funny and so good.
Yeah, and it's funny because, again, this is a departure from the comic books, because in the comic books, Wong is just Doctor Strange's like manservant at his
Mhm.
house. Like, he's just the guy. He's like his butler. And so he just does everything. and I believe they beefed up the character over the years too to obviously have some magical background and so they this character in the movie is slightly altered, of course, so to be um a student at the school as well, at Camartage. And
Mm-hmm.
so and later on, yes, they're both in the house together, and they both kind of become uh the caretakers of the New York Sanctum.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually, of course, Wong becomes Sorcerer Supreme himself,
On a
while Strange is,
technicality.
yeah, on a technicality, but he gets it.
Still
But
counts.
yeah, exactly. So it's a fun character that gets more fun later. He has some good moments in this first movie, but he definitely gets more screen time and more fleshed out in other things, like you said, in She-Hulk and other stuff, where he gets more time to shine, which I enjoy. So
He's definitely become one of my favorite characters to see.
oh yeah.
Whenever he pops up, like She-Hulk was probably the most fun I've had with him, where I just see
Oh
him
yeah.
watching like The Sopranos and This Is Us, and then and the character of Madison, just like him and her
Right.
having this fun interplay where she's just like Wongers, and it's just like, and he's just like, oh no, please, like,
Yep, but then they're later on sitting on the couch watching the show together, so they obviously became friends.
mm,
So but yeah, no, it's a fun character. But yeah, let's talk about this ending now. Because through the course of all of this, Caecilius and his acolytes have been trying to take out the three different sanctums. There's one in London, there's one in New York, and there's one in Hong Kong. And so now they've taken out the one in London. They're trying to take out the one in and they tried to take out the one in New York, but Strange managed to stop them. And so now they're trying to take on the one at Hong Kong. And by the time Strange manages to get there, it's been taken. Everybody's dead. The street is like wrecked everywhere around it. And Wong is dead. Like everybody's just dead.
yeah, I
Um,
love that it's a loss. It is automatically like,
yeah,
oh, we've already lost.
yeah. Um, and then he obviously he uses the time stone to rewind things back. And he realizes through the course of this, he doesn't need to be fighting Caecilius. He needs to go and talk to Dormammu, the ruler of the dark dimension. And it's
He
this
needs
great
to talk to
sequence.
himself.
Yeah, 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 exactly. Because he voices
Cumberbatch on
Dormammu as
Cumberbatch.
well.
It's like,
Yeah. Well, and it was interesting too because I think again this was something that Cumberbatch himself suggested, was that he played both a hero and a villain in this, and that and then uh, Scott Derrickson was like, that's really good idea because it's you talking to this overinflated ego version of yourself. What this would be like if you had all this power and everything. And so it's he transports himself over into the dark dimension to go talk to Dormammu, and he's just trying to like you said, he's trying to bargain with him. He wants him to stay out of Earth, and but meanwhile Dormammu keeps trying to kill him, or actually does kill him, but
mm-hmm.
Strange was smart and created a time loop that neither one of them could get out of until Dormammu makes the bargain. So
Yeah, because
so it's a
it's I love the brilliant thing where it's just like it's a superhero movie where the hero, because also the scene earlier when they're attacking the New York Sanctum, he kills one of the acolytes, and he tells the Ancient One, like, I'm a doctor, I took an oath to do no harm, and I've just killed someone. I can't do that. That's not what I'm gonna do. I mean, granted, he
right.
does, like, later on as they're doing the using the time stone, he's just like, I'm gonna throw you into a wall. I'm gonna Caecilius, I'm gonna throw you into a wall. Mordo, why don't you throw that guy into a fish tank? And he's just kind of he's like, I mean, granted, he knows like, all right, these are magical beings, they'll get out of it, but yeah, he's a superhero who doesn't throw a punch to defeat the villain. He goes
Yeah,
in and he's just like, I'm here to bargain with you,
he wins
and
by not fighting. Yeah,
yeah, because I love the lines too, where he's like the two lines that I love from Benedict Cumberbatch in this are when Dormammu is, he's telling Dormammu like, oh, the Earth is going to be safe, um, and Dormammu's like, well, you're never going to win. He's just like, but I can lose. I can lose again and again and again as long as it keeps them safe. And then the other line that, and it makes me feel very emotional about it when he tells him like, uh, he just says pain is an old friend. Like he's,
yeah,
he's basically just like, I've lived with this horrible damage done to my hands that I can't even move them without uncontrollably shaking. You know, this is my life now. I'm used to this
yeah,
pain. So I'm happy to die if it means I can save the world.
yeah, exactly. Yes, it sucks. Yes, he's feeling all this pain, but he's doing it so that he can save everybody else. And that's the ultimate moment right there for him, is that he's thinking outside of himself and doing what he can to save the world. And if that means he has to sacrifice himself over and over and over again to stop this guy from destroying the world, it's what it takes. So
Now I
um,
do have to ask though, what's your favorite death out of all of his deaths in that?
Oh, probably when he gets like impaled like a whole bunch. Just because it's just
That's a good
it's
one.
kind of gnarly-ish.
I
So
think mine is just when he gets crushed because
yeah,
he's about to drop the F bomb and then it's just like he's crushed.
yeah, yeah. No, it's a great sequence because it just shows one, that he's making this sacrifice, and two, that he's um using intelligence rather than having to actually fight. He's using his brain to fight rather than his skills or anything else. To he's forcing the villain to give up without a fight. And
Yeah, he's using everything he's learned to realize I can win this fight without fighting. I don't have
yeah,
to. I don't like this. Granted, this thing's bigger than me, so I know I can't win
yeah,
physically. So I'm just going to use what I have, and that's my brain.
yeah, absolutely. And it's, yeah, and in this instance, it's taking all of his skills. This intelligence that he has, the magical ability that he has, and just kind of rolling it all into one to make sure that he can win the day, and to save everybody as much as possible. And he wins. He manages to get Caecilius and the acolytes pulled into the dark dimension and removed from Earth completely. And in the process, they you see them transform, and they transform into these creatures in the comic books that are called the mindless ones. Um, and they're just these one-eyed, hulking beasts that are controlled by Dormammu. They're just his, like, his I guess what is his foot soldiers or whatever. So
Because yeah, I do love that he goes back, and it's just that moment where Caecilius is like, "What did you do?" And he's like, "Oh, I'm giving you everything you wanted. You're gonna be a
yeah,
part of the one." And he just immediately goes, "And you're not gonna like it." So
yeah, 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 you're gonna get what you want, but it's not gonna be how you want it. So, but yeah, and then in that moment, Strange gets back, and reverses all the damage and everything. And Mordo isn't happy. Mordo just thinks that he is using too much power, and without any kind of responsibility for it. And and he just walks away. He's like, I'm not going to be part of this any longer. And there's it's a little weird, in my opinion. I just think like I get his point to a degree, but I think he's going too far with it. Again, he goes too far with this idea of, and this is what we learn in the end credit sequence as well, that he the guy who originally Strange found out about, who was able to use the magic to heal his spine and walk again. Mordo goes to him and just rips the magic out of him, and and says that this is the problem right now. There's too many sorcerers.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and that it's also earlier when the ancient one is about to die, and she tells him like Mordo's rigid in his beliefs, and he
yeah,
needs you. He needs your flexibility to kind of balance him out. But at that point, it's already too late. Mordo's just like, I have to go. I don't like what you're doing, and I've seen too many people that I know and thought I cared about using stuff that I don't like, using methods that I
right.
don't care for. So yeah, I'm gonna take this up a notch and destroy all the sorcerers in the world that I can find.
Right. Like I'm going to take it to a more extreme place than what is necessary. But yeah.
Can't have a
um
nice sit down. I'm gonna destroy you guys.
yeah. Yeah, no, it's ridiculous. But yeah, and so I'm not upset in any way that they haven't completed the Mordo storyline, just because I'm like, it's, to me it doesn't feel as interesting um as other things that they could be doing instead. Maybe down the road, maybe make it a little side um storyline, a secondary B plot of one of the movies or something like that. But I don't want to see him become a major villain
Yeah,
that
I
he has to
know.
deal with.
Well, I think from what I remember, the original plan was they were gonna kill him like almost immediately in Multiverse of Madness. I
Oh,
think.
really?
Like I think yeah, the Mordo from our world was gonna be killed by Scarlet Witch like in the beginning,
Oh,
and
okay.
then it was like okay, so we're just pulling that thread and getting rid of that, so we're good. And but I think they realized like we'll just save it for later. We have a lot of threads we're tying into this one, so we can't really.
Right.
But I mean, yeah, I'd be happy to see Mordo come back in some capacity. Maybe. I mean, I know they've said, what is it? The Kang Dynasty is supposed to be the biggest MCU like crossover film of all of them. Like the cast is supposed to
Right.
be gigantic, like even bigger than Endgame. So maybe we'll see Mordo in there. He'll just be like a quick wave, and then he'll get like destroyed by one of the multiple Kangs.
Right.
We're like, "Hello, Steven."
That would be funny.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah, I think
I
I
will say
oh
that the
yeah, go
final
ahead.
shot, that final shot when he's putting on the watch, is very nice
Oh
and
yeah.
very emotional. And we see that the watch, because the watch has been such a through line of the film, that it's a nice
Right.
little. It's actually from Christine, so that's why it holds such sentimental value to him. And then we see his hands still shaking, still scarred, everything like that. So he hasn't healed them. And then just that shot, you see the Sanctum outside, and you see New York, and that's just like such a good final shot of everything before we get
Right.
the one mid credit scene from Ragnarok.
Yeah. Yeah. That's completely just a scene from Thor Ragnarok. That's
Yeah.
funny. Oh man. But yeah, so I mean, it's, and the watch definitely plays a role in Multiverse of Madness again. So
Mhm.
it's definitely something that keeps coming back. Um, but yeah, I think, this is a good movie. I like it a lot. I like how it sets up not only Doctor Strange, but the world of magic in general, that we kind of tap into here and there, going forward, not just with, Doctor Strange, but with Wong and, in Spider-Man No Way Home and everything. So there's definitely some more fun to be had with it. So it's it's
It's
it's
yeah,
it's a fun movie though.
it's definitely one I go back to more frequently than some in the MCU.
Right.
Um, it's a lot of fun. It's very excellent visually. I like the characters a lot, and it handles the origin in a unique way, as opposed to just kind of being very straightforward, just like basic origin film.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, it's 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 I think that, there's definitely, and it lays a lot of groundwork for things to come in the future. And like we mentioned, there's stuff in, Infinity War and everything that, and in game, that are connected to this movie, after that point. So it's nice to see, things laid out in this movie that get picked up later.
Definitely, it's a very good stepping stone into what's coming later in the MCU.
Right. Yeah, and very necessary stepping stone as well. So
right, it's not one. It's not. It doesn't try to throw a lot in where like some of the MCU movies in this era are kind of going for that, like, yeah, we're going to just kind of name check a few things here and there, and do some Easter eggs and things like that. The biggest thing I say we get in this is Wong mentions, like, oh well, when the Avengers protect us from certain threats, and we handle things on the more mystical plane. And it's like,
right.
okay, that's all we need. That's all I need to know. You don't need to keep name checking people like, man, Thor would really be a good dude to have in this situation. And obviously setting up the Infinity Stones with the Eye of Agamotto. But other than that, yeah, it feels very much like, okay, we're keeping this as self-contained, but we're also setting up what's coming later in this world.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's all I've got to say about this one. um, but yeah, no, I appreciate you coming on to talk about it.
Oh,
And
absolutely. Glad to come on.
yeah,
This is a fun movie to talk about. As opposed to with Incredible Hulk, where it was a fun movie to talk about but not fun to watch. This was fun to watch and fun to talk about. So
yeah,
that's definitely a bigger win than the last movie I was here to talk about. And I like the lead way more than in the last movie. So
yeah, yeah, definitely. Oh, that's funny. Well, why don't you let people know where they can find you online?
I am on Twitter at Kevin_U_87. I'm on Instagram as Kevin Thomas 1987, and I'm on Blue Sky as Kevin U87. So I'm pretty easy to find. Nothing too drastic as far as changes, except for on Instagram. Yeah, other than that, I currently no new episodes of my podcast at Video Confidential, but working on that for the spooky season.
All right.
So yeah, if you're ever looking for me, just type in Kevin Yu and you're bound to find me.
All right. Well, I appreciate you coming on. Thanks
Mhm.
again.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Thanks again to Kevin for joining me. On Monday, Christy Adams from Nightmare Toys returns to talk about Saw 3 and 4. And on Friday, Ashley Thomas from Podcast 616 returns to talk about Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. Thanks for listening. Creepy and Geeky is a part of the Morbidly Beautiful Podcast Network. Please check out morbidlybeautiful.com/podcasts for more great shows. If you like what you've heard, please consider giving the show 5 stars and a review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Also, please share the podcast on social media to help spread the word. Make sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast app or at creepyandgeeky.com. Music for the podcast is Gratitude, composed by Jerry Smith. You can follow the podcast on social media at Creepy and Geeky on both Twitter and Instagram. If you'd like to follow me, I'm Geek Thulu on Twitter and Blue Sky, and geek.thulu on Instagram. You can support the podcast by ordering teas and more on TeePublic or by donating to the coffee page. All of the links are in the show notes. Finally, don't forget, stay creepy.